You ever hear a kid ask a question so innocent, yet it feels like the ground just dropped out from under you? Picture this. A mother is standing in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, the warm scent of tomato sauce filling the air. Her little girl, only 7 years old, is sitting at the counter, swinging her legs and coloring. Out of nowhere, the girl looks up and asks, "Mommy, why don't I look like you?" Now pause. Just sit with that question for a second. It seems like something simple, right? Something any parent might laugh off or answer without much thought. But not this mom. When she heard those words, her hands froze mid-chop. Her heart skipped. Her mind raced. Because the truth, the real answer behind that question, was something she'd been hiding for years. Now, before we dive in, I want you to know something. This isn't just some random story tossed together for shock value. If you're a parent, if you've ever been a child, or if you've ever looked in the mirror and wondered where you really come from, this story is going to hit you deep. And I promise you this. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that question, so small, so simple, unlocked a secret this mom had prayed would stay buried forever. So stick with me. You came here looking for an answer, and I'm not going to make you chase it. But the road to that truth? It's not straight. It's filled with twists, heartbreak, and a moment that will leave you speechless. And look, I know how easy it is to scroll away. There are 1,000 videos out there fighting for your attention. True crime breakdowns, AI-generated faces, TikTok scandals, and whatever wild thing Mr. Beast is doing today. But this story? This is something different. This is real. This is human. It's about family, identity, and what happens when the truth won't stay hidden anymore. I'm not talking about a jump scare or a prank gone wrong. I'm talking about the kind of story that makes you question how well you know the people closest to you. Makes you remember conversations from your own life. Maybe even sparks a memory you've buried. And the best part? It all unfolds in a way you won't see coming. So take a second, grab your drink, settle in, and lock in. Because you're about to watch something unforgettable. Let's rewind the clock a bit. The girl's name is Lily, and from the outside looking in, she's like any other second grader. Big smile. Always curious. Loves drawing suns with sunglasses and hearts with wings. Her mom, Rachel, is the kind of woman everyone in their suburban neighborhood waves to when she walks her dog. She's kind, organized, maybe a little quiet, but always involved. PTA meetings, soccer snacks, back-to-school night. Rachel's there. No husband in the picture. Not anymore, anyway. Just Rachel and Lily, doing life one weekday at a time. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of place. Until Lily starts to notice the little things. You see, Lily has curly jet black hair and warm brown eyes that sparkle when she laughs. Rachel, on the other hand, has strawberry blonde waves and eyes so blue they look like bottled sky. At first, Lily didn't think much of it. Kids see differences all the time. But over time, questions started bubbling up. Why do the other kids say she looks adopted? Why doesn't she have baby pictures of herself as a newborn? Why does Rachel always change the subject when Lily asks about the day she was born? Rachel had always brushed these things off with a hug and a smile. But a child can feel when something's off, especially when it comes from the person they trust most. Now I want to ask you something directly. Think about someone in your life right now, a parent, a child, a friend. If they ask you the one question you've spent years avoiding, what would you do? Would you lie? Deflect? Or would you finally tell them the truth, no matter the cost? Because in that moment, when Lily asked, "Why don't I look like you?" Rachel had a choice to make. A choice that would change not just her daughter's life, but hers too. Forever. I'm going to take you behind the scenes of that moment. Not just what was said, but what was felt. The silence. The hesitation. The flicker of something buried behind Rachel's eyes. You're going to hear what Rachel told her daughter, and you're going to understand why she couldn't tell her sooner. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a real story, with real consequences. And just when you think you have it figured out, trust me, the truth takes a turn. By the way, we're just getting started. The question Lily asked? That was only the surface. What came next opened up a past that someone had tried very hard to erase. Documents. Photographs. A name Rachel hadn't said out loud in almost a decade, and a call she never thought she'd have to make. So, if you think this story is just about adoption, think again. If you think it's just about a mom hiding something for her daughter's own good, keep watching. Because what Rachel reveals is something far more personal, far more complicated, and far more connected to a danger she hoped had stayed in the past. And when you see who else gets involved, when you see how deep the roots of this secret really go, you'll understand why the truth didn't just threaten to change their lives. It nearly destroyed them. And now I've got to warn you. The next part of the story is where things start to shift, where Lily starts digging, where an old letter shows up, where a stranger knocks on their door. What happens after that? Well, let's just say, it's not what either of them expected. We're about to uncover a twist that flips everything upside down, and it all starts with a name. A name Rachel thought she'd left behind years ago. A name Lily had never heard before. Until now. Over the last few months, Rachel had started noticing subtle changes in Lily's behavior. Nothing alarming, but enough to stir that quiet unease only a parent can recognize. She was asking more questions than usual about everything: family, school, where babies come from, even death. Rachel had chalked it up to her daughter simply growing up, the way kids naturally start trying to make sense of the world. But there were moments, quick, fleeting ones, that left Rachel wondering if something more was going on beneath the surface. Lily would sometimes stare at family photos a little too long, her small fingers tracing the outlines of faces. She'd squint at Rachel, almost as if trying to find a resemblance she wasn't sure existed. And at night, she had begun waking up from dreams she couldn't explain, asking strange questions like, did I ever live in a different house before this? Or was I born in a hospital with big windows? They were questions Rachel had always hoped she wouldn't have to answer. What most people in their neighborhood didn't know was that Rachel hadn't always lived this quiet, suburban life. Years ago, she had a different name, a different job, and a very different story. Back then, she was caught in something dangerous, something that forced her to walk away from everything she knew, including people she once trusted with her life. When she moved across the country and settled into this new town, she promised herself she'd leave it all behind. No more late-night phone calls. No more looking over her shoulder. No more second-guessing everyone she met. That was before Lily. And Rachel had sworn that no matter what, she would protect her daughter from ever having to know any of it. But sometimes, the past doesn't stay where you put it. And lately, Rachel had started seeing signs. Tiny, seemingly harmless things at first, but just enough to set her nerves on edge. A letter with no return address had arrived in the mailbox 2 weeks ago. It was empty, just a single sheet of blank paper inside. The mailman swore it came through the regular delivery route, nothing suspicious about it. Then there was the man who had started showing up near Lily's school, not close enough to raise alarm, but just within view. Rachel had spotted him twice from her car. Both times, he was leaning against the same lamppost, wearing a dark ball cap and sunglasses. The kind of look that's trying not to stand out but ends up doing just the opposite. When she approached him the second time, he disappeared behind the school gate like smoke. And ever since then, that lingering feeling Rachel had worked so hard to bury, the one that something wasn't right, had been growing stronger by the day. To everyone else, Rachel's life seemed perfectly ordinary. She was polite but private, involved but never too familiar. She had a small circle of friends, mostly other moms from school events, but none she let close enough to ask the real questions. Not about her past. Not about Lily's father. And certainly not about the man from her former life, the one whose name she hadn't spoken in almost 8 years. There were whispers, of course. There always are in neighborhoods like this. One woman swore Rachel used to be famous. Another claimed she was running from an abusive ex. But the truth was something none of them could have guessed, and if they had, they wouldn't have believed it. Even Lily's school had recently taken notice. Her teacher had called Rachel in for a parent-teacher conference, gently mentioning that Lily had become more withdrawn during free play. She wasn't acting out, not exactly, but she had started drawing strange pictures. The same house over and over again. always with a tall man standing in front, and always with a little girl looking out from the top window. Rachel had smiled, said she'd talk to Lily, and brushed it off as nothing. But that night, she locked every door in the house twice. And when she went to check on Lily as she slept, she found her clutching a photo Rachel didn't even know she still had, an old Polaroid, tucked deep in the back of a drawer, showing Rachel with a man whose face had long haunted her dreams. It was becoming clear that someone somewhere was watching. Or worse, waiting. And Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that Lily's sudden curiosity wasn't just a phase. It felt planted, as if something or someone had triggered it. But who? And why now, after all these years? The list of people who knew Rachel's real story was short. Most of them she hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. One she was certain had died. Another had disappeared right before Rachel had vanished herself. But there was one person, just one, who had both the motive and the means to find her. Someone she thought she'd left in the rearview mirror forever. Of course, it could all be coincidence. Maybe the letter was a prank. Maybe the man at the school was just another parent. Maybe Lily's questions were just the natural curiosity of a smart, observant child. But Rachel had lived through too much to believe in coincidences. And the more she tried to push the doubts aside, the more they kept creeping back in, late at night, in quiet moments, when Lily would say something that felt just a little too knowing. Like the time she asked, "Mommy, did I used to have a different name?" Rachel had laughed, kissed her on the forehead, and changed the subject. But her heart had dropped. Because Lily did have another name. One that had been erased years ago, along with the rest of the identity Rachel had to give up in order to keep them both safe. And now, with the past inching closer every day, Rachel found herself questioning everything and everyone. The neighbor who always seemed too interested in their schedule. The old friend who suddenly reached out on social media after years of silence. Even Lily's substitute teacher, who looked just a little too familiar, as if he might have once known her under a different name, in a different life. It was like walking through a hall of mirrors. Everything distorted, nothing quite what it seemed. And the closer Rachel got to finding out who, or what, was behind the sudden unraveling of their peaceful life, the more dangerous it all started to feel. But none of it compared to what happened the night Rachel heard Lily talking in her sleep. It was around midnight. The house was quiet. Rachel was folding laundry in the living room when she heard her daughter's voice, soft, muffled, but clear enough to understand. "I saw him," Lily whispered. "He was in the window again. But this time, he waved at me." Rachel froze. Her blood ran cold. Lily had never said anything like that before. And what Rachel didn't know, what would come to light only later, was that this wasn't the first time Lily had seen the man she was talking about. And he wasn't just in her dreams. Something was happening. Something Rachel couldn't explain, but could no longer ignore. The question was this the beginning of the truth coming to light? Or was it the return of something far worse? You'll want to hear what happens next. Because the clue that finally breaks everything wide open doesn't come from Rachel. It comes from Lily. And once she says it out loud, there's no going back. It was the following afternoon when the first real roadblock appeared, subtle, but impossible to ignore. Rachel had decided to finally go looking for the old file she'd hidden in the crawl space years ago, a sealed manila envelope containing the only copies of Lily's early records. It wasn't much, an old hospital bracelet, a few intake forms, and one faded photo taken on the day Rachel had left everything behind. It was the last trace of their original identities before she'd changed their names, changed their location, changed everything to disappear. She hadn't touched it in years, mostly because she didn't want to, but now, with the questions piling up and the feeling of being watched growing stronger, she knew she needed that file. But when she opened the box where it had always been, the envelope was gone. Completely gone. The rest of the box was untouched. Old winter coats, a broken lamp, a high school yearbook. But the envelope had vanished without a trace. She searched everywhere. The attic, the closets, even beneath the floorboards of the hallway where she had once stashed spare keys. Nothing. It made no sense. Rachel had lived in a constant state of caution for so long, she knew she wouldn't have moved it without remembering. which left only one terrifying conclusion. Someone had found it. Someone had come into the house, into her private space, and taken the one thing that could unravel everything she'd spent years trying to protect. The front door had been locked, the windows sealed. No signs of a break-in. But when Rachel looked at her phone's notifications, she noticed something strange. Her security camera app had stopped recording 3 nights earlier, right around the time Lily started talking in her sleep. That night, Rachel didn't sleep at all. She sat in the living room with the lights off, the cold blue glow of her phone's screen the only thing keeping her grounded. Her mind raced through every possibility. Was it the man at the school? Had someone in the neighborhood figured her out? Or was it something even worse? Someone from the old life? Someone she thought she'd escaped for good? She was still trying to make sense of it when a new message pinged her phone. It was anonymous, sent from an untraceable email, and it said only 6 words. Stop looking. She's better off not knowing. There was no name, no threat, just a chilling certainty that whoever sent it knew exactly what she was doing. Rachel's hands trembled. She deleted the message, took a deep breath, and told herself it was probably just some sick troll. But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't random. This was targeted. The following day brought another shock. Rachel decided to speak with Lily's art teacher, hoping maybe she could shed some light on the strange drawings, the recurring house, the tall man, the little girl in the window. Mrs. Perkins, a kind woman in her 60s, pulled out a folder of Lily's work without hesitation. But as she flipped through the pages, her brow furrowed. The house drawings were gone. Every single one. She remembered them, distinct, eerie, repeated across multiple days. But the folder now held only colorful, happy sketches of parks, animals, and school friends. No house. No man. When Rachel asked if she was sure, Mrs. Perkins hesitated, then leaned in close. "Between you and me," she whispered, "a man came in asking about Lily's work last week. Said he was your brother. Said you approved it. I figured maybe it was something family-related." Rachel felt her heart drop. She had no brother, and she had definitely not approved anything. It was becoming harder and harder to tell who she could trust. Even Lily's behavior had started to shift in subtle but unsettling ways. She'd become quieter, more withdrawn, not in a sad way, but more like she was thinking all the time, even when no one was talking to her. At dinner, she started asking strange questions again. Not the innocent, childlike ones she used to ask, but deeper ones. Do people ever remember things from when they were babies? Can someone tell you a dream that's not really yours? How do you know someone's telling the truth if you don't remember it yourself? Rachel tried to answer without feeding the fire, but the dread was getting harder to disguise. Then came the night Lily woke up screaming, not crying, not whimpering, screaming. When Rachel ran into her room, Lily looked her dead in the eyes and asked, "Why did he call me Emily?" That name, Emily, wasn't one Rachel had ever used around Lily. Not once. It was the name she was given at birth. The name Rachel had buried along with everything else when she disappeared. She hadn't spoken it aloud in 7 years. And yet, somehow, Lily had said it like she knew it, like someone had told her. It was the final straw. Rachel needed answers, and she needed them fast. So, she did something she'd promised herself she never would. She reached out to an old contact. His name was Dan Halperin, a private investigator who used to work with her back when everything fell apart. He was the only one from her past she thought might still owe her a favor. But even that didn't go smoothly. When she called his number, a woman answered. She said Dan hadn't been seen in weeks. Last anyone heard, he was looking into a cold case involving child trafficking and missing identities. Rachel didn't have to ask. She knew it was connected. She knew whatever Dan had been chasing had led him too close to the truth. And now, just like the file, just like the drawings, just like the camera footage, Dan was gone too. And then, just when Rachel thought she couldn't be pulled any deeper into the spiral, she found something she couldn't explain. It was in Lily's backpack, tucked between her school notebooks and a crumpled juice box. A photograph, old, discolored, clearly printed years ago. It showed Rachel, but not the Rachel she was now. This was a version of her from a lifetime ago, standing next to a man whose face was crossed out with black marker. The back of the photo had a date scrawled in shaky handwriting, June 14, 2017, and 2 words beneath it, "She knows." Rachel stared at the photo for what felt like forever. She had no idea how it ended up in Lily's bag. She had no idea who took it, or who crossed out the man's face. All she knew was that someone had gone through a lot of trouble to let her know. The past wasn't just creeping in, it had already arrived. And then came the call. A number Rachel didn't recognize. When she answered, the line was quiet. Then a voice, distorted, mechanical, spoke just 4 words before disconnecting. "You've lied long enough." Rachel barely had time to process the cryptic phone call when the secondary shockwave hit, one she never saw coming. That evening, as she sat curled on the edge of the couch, mind racing through 1,000 fragmented memories and imagined scenarios, her phone lit up with a text from an old acquaintance she hadn't heard from in years. "Did you send me something?" It was from Erica Monroe, a woman Rachel had once worked with during her time under a government relocation program, back when she was still trying to secure a new identity, a clean slate. Rachel had trusted Erica with more than she should have. Details about Lily's birth, whispers of her reasons for fleeing, fragments of the life she was trying to erase. Rachel responded immediately, asking what Erica meant. The reply came seconds later, this time with a photo attached. It was a screenshot of an envelope, identical to the one that had gone missing from Rachel's crawl space. On it, in red ink, was Rachel's old alias and a single typed sentence, "You're not the only one with secrets." Erica's message underneath said simply, "You need to talk to me. Now." Rachel drove 3 hours that night without telling anyone. She left Lily with a trusted neighbor and didn't explain why. Her nerves were shredded by the time she reached Erica's small apartment, tucked behind a grocery store off a quiet rural road. Erica looked older, worn down by the kind of stress that lingers for years, but her eyes were sharp as ever. She didn't offer hugs or small talk, just opened the door and pulled Rachel inside. Then, without even sitting down, she opened a drawer and laid out a file full of documents Rachel had never seen. Court papers, sealed affidavits, a handful of redacted transcripts. Most of them referenced a name Rachel hadn't heard in years, Gideon Lane. He was the man she had once trusted, someone who claimed he could help her disappear. Someone who promised to protect her and Lily when the people she was running from got too close. But according to Erica, Gideon didn't just vanish. He had been investigated quietly for forging new identities, laundering records, and hiding children who weren't always his to protect. This new information shattered what little sense of stability Rachel had left. Because if what Erica said was true, then it was possible, terrifyingly possible, that Lily's birth, her papers, her entire origin story, may not be what Rachel believed. Erica didn't accuse her outright, but she raised a horrifying possibility that someone else may have been looking for Lily long before Rachel knew she was in danger. That someone, maybe even Gideon, may have had an agenda Rachel never knew about. One of the documents in Erica's file was a birth certificate dated 3 days before Lily's birthday. Same hospital, different baby name, same timestamp. The implication was clear. Either it was a clerical error, or someone had switched records. Rachel reeled. Every breath felt like she was drowning deeper in the unknown. Everything she'd built her life on was now in question. And as if the universe had decided to twist the knife, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail. It came from Lily's school principal. The message was panicked, almost frantic. She said there had been a lockdown that morning. A man had tried to gain access to the school through a side entrance, claiming he was there to pick up his daughter, Emily. When asked for ID, he walked away without a word. No one had seen where he went. But the surveillance footage captured a clear image of his face, and when Rachel finally got a copy of the still frame, her heart stopped cold. It was Gideon. Rachel hadn't seen his face since the day she left. The photo showed him older, but unmistakably him. And now, the nightmare she'd spent years outrunning was no longer distant or abstract. It was walking directly toward them, stepping back into the world she had tried so desperately to close off. Erica didn't need to say anything. The look on her face said enough. Rachel grabbed the file, thanked her quietly, and walked out without looking back. Driving home in silence, Rachel's mind circled one terrifying question. What if Lily wasn't just being watched? What if she was being claimed? And worse, what if the people who were after her had a legal reason to do it? What if everything Rachel believed about her motherhood, about her sacrifice, about the life she saved, was built on a lie planted years ago by a man who never stopped watching? Back at home, things only got stranger. Lily had found the photo Rachel had hidden deep in the laundry room drawer, the one from her past, with the blacked-out man and the notes scrawled on the back. But Lily said something that stopped Rachel cold. "I didn't find it. He gave it to me." Rachel tried to stay calm, asking who he was, but Lily only shrugged and said, "The man who was waiting in the backyard. He said you knew him." Rachel bolted to the window. There was nothing but darkness and wind. No sign of footprints. No sign of entry. The motion lights hadn't been triggered. But Lily's tone was so matter-of-fact, so unnervingly certain. It left no room for doubt. Someone had been there. And they weren't hiding anymore. It all pointed to something bigger than Rachel had imagined, something that reached back further than even she had known. Because now there were too many loose ends, too many unexplained pieces. Who was the baby listed on that other certificate? Who was the man claiming to be Lily's father? And if Gideon was back, what did he want? Answers? Revenge? Or something much more terrifying? Rachel didn't know. But she knew one thing. She had to dig deeper. She had to find the original hospital staff, the nurse who helped deliver Lily, the clerk who signed off on the paperwork, the one person who might be able to verify whether or not Rachel had taken home the right baby. But just as she sat down to start that search, before she could even type the first name into her browser, her screen went black. Her entire system shut down. Every device in the house powered off at once. And from the hallway came the sound of a phone ringing. Only it wasn't hers. It was Lily's toy phone, the one without batteries. Ringing. Again. Rachel stood frozen in the doorway, eyes locked on the small plastic toy phone that lay innocently on the hallway floor. It rang again, that shrill, out-of-place sound echoing off the walls like something out of a nightmare. She bent down slowly, her hand shaking as she picked it up. It went silent the moment her fingers touched it. No buttons, no battery, no power source. Just cold, molded plastic and a speaker that shouldn't be capable of making any sound at all. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, from behind her, she heard the unmistakable creak of the back door opening. Quiet, deliberate. Not blown open by wind. Opened. By someone. Rachel turned sharply, her heart racing in her chest, her mind screaming for her to run, but her feet stayed planted. When she finally reached the kitchen, the door was wide open, letting in the chill of the night air. But no one was there. Just the dark backyard stretching out in silence, with the swing set barely moving in the breeze. That's when she realized it wasn't just about her anymore. Someone was playing with her, testing her, and now they had made it clear they could get in. They already had. She didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. She sat in Lily's room with a fireplace poker in one hand and a flashlight in the other, watching over her daughter as she slept, wondering if this would be the last night they spent in that house. Morning came, and with it came a horrible discovery. Rachel's neighbor, Angela, the one she'd left Lily with during her late-night drive, was missing. Her mailbox was overfilled, her car still in the driveway, but her house was locked and quiet. Rachel knocked, called, even tried the back door. Nothing. No answer. Angela was the kind of woman who kept to a strict routine, walked her dog twice a day, waved at passing cars, always brought cookies over after school. She wouldn't have left without saying something. Rachel called the police, but when they arrived and did their check, they found no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no explanation. Angela had simply vanished, leaving behind a still warm cup of coffee on her kitchen counter and her phone sitting face down on the nightstand with a missed call from an unlisted number. Rachel didn't need to guess. She already knew. This was a warning. The walls were closing in faster now. Rachel started to notice people watching her at the grocery store, lingering a little too long near her car in the parking lot, following behind her when she changed lanes on the highway. She thought maybe it was paranoia. Maybe all of this was finally breaking her down, but then she found the tracker. Hidden inside the lining of Lily's backpack, stitched behind a flap that hadn't been touched in years. A tiny black device with a blinking red light. She brought it to a local electronics store, pretending it was a part for an old phone. The tech behind the counter gave her a strange look and said, "This isn't for phones. This is military-grade GPS. You don't find this in Best Buy." Rachel didn't ask for more. She didn't want to hear the rest. She went home and burned the thing in her sink. Her anxiety became a permanent shadow, always trailing just behind her, tightening around her throat with every new discovery. She started second-guessing everything: who she spoke to, where she went, what she said. She even started to suspect her own friends, people she'd known for years. Like Jenna, another parent from Lily's school, who suddenly seemed overly curious about their life, who started asking questions that felt too specific, too rehearsed. One day, Jenna let it slip that she'd seen Rachel's hospital records, information Rachel knew for a fact had been sealed. When Rachel asked how, Jenna backtracked fast, saying she must have misunderstood. But Rachel saw the look in her eyes, the flicker of panic, the slip of a lie. Someone had gotten to her. Or maybe Jenna had been working with them all along. The paranoia bled into her dreams. Nightmares plagued her every time she tried to close her eyes. She'd wake up in cold sweats, hearing Lily call out for her from another room only to find her fast asleep in bed. She began sleeping in Lily's room, locking the door from the inside, keeping a flashlight and a knife under the mattress. The isolation was unbearable. No one believed her. The police dismissed the tracker as a misunderstood toy. The school thought she was being overly protective. And even Erica had gone quiet, not answering texts or calls for 3 days. Rachel was alone again, truly alone, like she had been when she first ran all those years ago. But this time it was worse, because now they were showing her what they were capable of. They weren't just after information. They were after Lily. One evening, as Rachel was going through a box of old family keepsakes, desperately trying to find something, anything, to prove her version of the truth, she came across a photograph she didn't recognize. It was tucked inside an old children's book Lily used to read before bed, one they hadn't opened in years. The photo was yellowed with age and showed a woman holding a baby in front of a hospital. Rachel turned it over, hoping for some clue, and saw handwriting that stopped her heart cold. "You took what wasn't yours." She remembers. It was written in the same shaky handwriting that had been on the back of the photo found in Lily's bag. Rachel's mind snapped back to Lily's dreams, to the way she'd spoken of things no child should know, to the name she'd spoken in the middle of the night, Emily. What if Lily did remember something? What if those memories weren't dreams at all, but fragments from another life? A life before Rachel. A life someone else wanted her to return to. And what if Rachel had never been meant to be her mother in the first place? Just as that horrible thought took root, the power went out again. Not just in her house, but the entire block. Darkness swallowed them whole. Rachel rushed to the window, heart pounding, and saw a shadow standing at the edge of the yard. Not moving, just standing there, watching. She grabbed the flashlight and swung it around, but by the time the beam landed, the figure was gone. And then Lily spoke from behind her, still half asleep, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said I was almost ready to go home." Rachel turned to her, eyes wide, a chill spreading through her veins. "Who said that, sweetie?" Lily just stared at her with eyes too calm, too knowing, and said, "My other daddy." Rachel didn't respond. She couldn't, because in that moment, every single truth she thought she knew came crashing down. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she realized she might not just be running from danger, she might be living in the middle of someone else's twisted game. And it was far from over. Rachel had spent the next 2 days in survival mode. Every shadow felt like it was watching her. Every creak in the house echoed like a threat. She'd started sleeping with her keys in her hand, ready to bolt at the slightest noise, while Lily remained unusually calm, too calm for a child who should have been terrified. It was as if something inside her had shut off, like she knew more than she should and had quietly accepted it. Rachel didn't know what was real anymore. The police brushed her off, her friends ghosted her, and Angela still hadn't turned up. The last straw came when Rachel found her front door wide open one morning. No sign of forced entry, no alarm triggered. But what stopped her cold was the note sitting on the living room table. Folded neatly, perfectly centered. No envelope. Just one line, written in a familiar hand. She was never yours. Rachel couldn't stop shaking as she read it again and again. Not because the words were threatening, but because she recognized the handwriting. It belonged to Erica, her best friend. The only person who knew everything. The one person she thought she could trust. Rachel had no idea what to believe anymore, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to confront Erica.
Now.
She drove straight to her apartment, running every stop sign along the way. But Erica wasn't there. The place was half-packed, boxes by the door, drawers emptied out. Her car was gone. It looked like she'd vanished mid-move, as if she'd been preparing to leave town and decided to speed it up. Rachel was about to call the police again, but she spotted a laptop left open on the dining table. On the screen was an email draft. The subject line was blank. The body read, "She's starting to remember. You said she wouldn't. You promised she wouldn't." Rachel stepped back, stunned. She scrolled through the sent folder. Hundreds of messages, all cryptic, all addressed to a single email chain with no name attached. But what chilled her most were the attachments. Surveillance photos of Rachel and Lily, at the park, in the grocery store, leaving school. All time-stamped, all recent. Erica had been tracking them. For how long?
And why?
As Rachel was about to leave, she noticed something tucked beneath the couch cushion, a manila envelope, half-sealed and labeled in marker. "If I disappear." Inside were dozens of documents, birth records, adoption papers, legal transcripts, and then a death certificate. Rachel's name was on it. Her full legal name. Declared deceased nearly 6 years ago. The date of death matched the night Rachel had faked her identity and fled with Lily. But how could that be? Who had filed it? How had the state accepted it? She scanned the signature at the bottom. It wasn't hers. It wasn't a judge's. It was someone else's name entirely, and it made her stomach turn. Dr. Paul J. Caro. A name she hadn't heard in years. A name she thought was buried in the past. Dr. Caro had been the specialist assigned to Lily's birth mother before the incident. The one who testified she was unfit to raise a child. The one who helped place Lily into foster care. But what Rachel didn't know back then, what no one told her, was that Dr. Caro had been under investigation for ethics violations and unapproved psychological experiments. The case had been buried when funding mysteriously dried up and files were sealed. But now it was clear. He hadn't just vanished. He had kept going.
Underground.
Off the books. And somehow, Rachel and Lily were caught in the center of it all. Rachel remembered the way Lily had described her other daddy. The calmness in her voice. The specifics in her dreams. She remembered the note. She remembers. What if Lily wasn't just remembering a previous family, but memories implanted by someone like Caro? What if the dreams weren't dreams at all, but triggers? And what if Rachel had been chosen not to save Lily, but to test how long it would take for the truth to surface? Rachel felt sick. None of this had been an accident. The adoption. The sealed records. The friendly neighbor who had now disappeared. Even Erica. They were all part of something bigger. A program. A cover-up. Maybe even a study. And then, just as Rachel was about to leave Erica's apartment with the files in hand, her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. There was silence. Then a voice she hadn't heard in years. Flat, clinical, unmistakable. "Rachel, stop running. She belongs to us." Rachel dropped the phone. It shattered against the floor, but it didn't matter. The voice was still ringing in her ears. Caro was alive, and he wasn't hiding anymore. That night, Rachel drove Lily out of town, no destination in mind. Just distance. But as they reached the edge of the city, Lily stirred awake and said something that sent a chill through Rachel's bones. "You won't get far, Mommy. They're already here." Rachel slammed on the brakes. She turned to Lily, her voice trembling. "What do you mean, sweetie? Who's here?" Lily blinked slowly, like she was coming out of a trance. Then, in a voice that wasn't quite hers, she whispered, "You shouldn't have taken me." And for the first time, Rachel saw something in her daughter's eyes that didn't belong to a child. Something older. Something implanted. Something watching her from behind Lily's innocent gaze. And just like that, the entire truth twisted beneath her feet. Maybe she hadn't rescued Lily at all. Maybe she'd been lured into the role of mother. And maybe the real experiment had never been on Lily. Maybe it had always been on her. Rachel didn't sleep that night.
How could she?
Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's face, no longer her daughter's, but something else. Someone else. The whisper still echoed in her mind. "You shouldn't have taken me." She kept replaying those words, trying to find the girl she had raised for 6 years in them. But they didn't sound like Lily. They sounded like a warning. By sunrise, she had pulled over at a remote motel outside an old industrial town, a place so small it barely showed up on Google Maps. The parking lot was empty, the office unlocked but unmanned, and the key rack behind the counter dusty with neglect. She didn't care. She grabbed a key and locked the door behind them, not even checking which room it belonged to. She just needed a place to breathe, a place to think. But even as she watched Lily sleeping, curled up under a thin sheet with her favorite bunny clutched in one arm, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her little girl had shifted. She spent the next few hours poring over the files she'd taken from Erica's apartment, cross-referencing names, dates, places, anything that could explain the scope of what she'd stepped into. There were old court transcripts, psychiatric evaluations, and strange notations written in shorthand, likely medical, maybe code. There was even a photo tucked into one of the files, creased and faded with time. It showed a group of people in lab coats standing in front of a government building that had long since been shut down. In the center was Caro. And to his left was Erica. Younger. Smiling. Not just a friend. A colleague. Rachel felt her stomach knot up. She had trusted this woman with her life. Let her babysit Lily. Confided in her when no one else would listen. And now it was clear Erica had been part of this from the start. But what did she want? And why did she back out? Rachel knew she couldn't run forever. But she also knew going to the authorities would be useless. She tried calling the last decent detective she knew from her past life, Detective Mark Tennant. He'd been kind once, and more importantly, he'd believed her when others hadn't. But when he picked up, his voice was tense.
Short.
Not like the man she remembered. "Rachel, you need to stop calling people. They're listening, and they already know where you are." She froze. "Mark, please, you have to help me. I think Erica's gone. And Lily, something's happening to her." There was a pause. A long one. Then he spoke quietly. "You need to choose, Rachel.
Right now.
You either bring the child in, or you disappear for good. I can't protect you anymore." Then he hung up. The room spun. It wasn't just about keeping Lily safe now. It was about deciding if she could even trust what Lily really was. Was she protecting her daughter, or harboring something she didn't understand? The choice gutted her. Either hand over the child she'd loved, raised, fought for, or keep running and risk being hunted down like prey. Neither option gave her peace. But as she looked at Lily, who was now awake and watching her silently from the bed, Rachel saw something flicker in her daughter's eyes. Fear. Not menace. Not manipulation. Just raw fear. Like she knew what was coming. Like she remembered everything and was too afraid to say it. Rachel sat beside her, took her hand gently. "Sweetheart, do you know who I am?" Lily nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "Your mommy." Rachel squeezed her hand. "And, do you know what's happening to you?" Lily looked away. "They said I'd forget. They said it wouldn't hurt. But it does, Mommy. It hurts every time I dream." Rachel's heart shattered. Her child was in pain. She hadn't been trained for this. She was just a woman who wanted a family. But now she was holding a ticking clock, one that had people watching, waiting, and ready to take her child away for good. And then the door rattled. Not a knock, not someone asking to come in, just a deliberate, slow jostling of the handle. Rachel shot up, grabbing the only thing she could find, a rusty lamp from the bedside table. Her heart pounded as she pressed Lily behind her. The rattling stopped. Silence. Then a low voice from the other side of the door. "We don't want to hurt her. But you need to understand, this isn't your story anymore." Rachel didn't answer. She backed away from the door and guided Lily toward the bathroom, locking them both inside. As the footsteps faded down the hallway, she finally let herself collapse onto the tile floor, her chest heaving. They had found her again, and they were no longer hiding in the shadows. But what did they mean? This isn't your story anymore? Had Rachel been a pawn in someone else's game from the beginning? Was this whole life she'd built a lie to serve someone else's agenda?
She didn't know.
But what she did know was that she had no one left to trust. And as she looked at her trembling daughter, she realized the real question wasn't whether Lily had been taken, it was whether she'd ever truly been returned. Rachel didn't sleep again. She couldn't. Every sound outside the motel walls echoed in her chest like a warning. She kept Lily close, both of them curled on the floor of the tiny bathroom, the cold tile pressing into her spine. But even there, locked away, she didn't feel safe. Especially not after what the voice outside the door had said. That it wasn't her story anymore. That line wouldn't leave her alone. It haunted her, gnawed at her, made her question every decision she'd ever made since taking Lily in. Who was really writing the story? And when had she lost control of it? By sunrise, Rachel made a decision. She couldn't run anymore, not blindly. She needed answers, real ones, even if it meant walking straight into the lion's den. She remembered a name that had come up more than once in the files from Erica's apartment, an old government facility labeled Project Haven Point. It had been decommissioned after a congressional inquiry into illegal psychological trials on minors, but the files hinted that some activity had never actually stopped. Rumors said the testing moved underground, figuratively and literally. The coordinates written in Erica's frantic handwriting led to an old fire road in the mountains north of the state line, completely off-grid. Rachel didn't know what she expected to find there, but something told her this place held the key to everything. They drove for hours, Rachel gripping the wheel so tightly her fingers went numb. The deeper they went into the forest, the more it felt like the air itself was turning against them, heavier, colder, like it was warning them to go back. But Lily, surprisingly, said nothing. She just stared out the window, quiet and distant, almost like she was waiting for something to happen. Finally, after miles of dirt and gravel, they came upon it, what looked like an old ranger station built into the hillside, completely overgrown. From the outside, it looked abandoned. But Rachel knew better. The power line running into the hill hadn't rusted. The grass near the side panel had been recently disturbed. And on the steel hatch near the back wall was a small fingerprint scanner, covered in dirt, but very much functional. Before Rachel could even begin to guess how they'd get in, Lily stepped forward.
Come.
Unshaken. She placed her tiny hand on the scanner. Rachel's heart stopped, but the hatch clicked open. Lily turned to her and said, "They built it for me." Inside, the temperature dropped. Everything was sterile, metallic, humming with quiet energy. The lights flickered on without motion sensors, like they knew someone had arrived. Rachel held Lily's hand tightly as they descended deeper into the facility, hallways stretching out like a maze of secrets. Old rooms were filled with rusting equipment, broken monitors, thick folders covered in dust. But then they found the first room that wasn't abandoned. The walls were covered in live security feeds. Cameras.
Hundreds of them.
All showing different angles of people, kids, teens, adults, living completely normal lives in cities and towns across the country. Grocery stores, schoolyards, bedrooms. Rachel's skin crawled as she realized these weren't security feeds, they were surveillance files. And the people on them had no idea they were being watched. Labeled in red font at the top of each screen was a single word, subject. Rachel scanned the screens and gasped when she saw herself. Walking Lily to school, laughing in the park, crying alone in her kitchen. Footage from months ago.
Years.
Someone had been watching them since the very beginning. She turned to Lily, heart pounding. What is this, baby? But Lily didn't answer. She looked blank again, lost in a trance. Then a voice came from behind them, and Rachel knew instantly who it was. Welcome back, Rachel. Dr. Paul J. Caro. He was older now, but unchanged in all the ways that mattered, still cold, analytical, and far too calm for a man who had orchestrated something this horrifying. You were never supposed to find this place, he said. But I suppose that was always your flaw, curiosity. Rachel was trembling with fury. What did you do to her? What is she? Caro raised an eyebrow. You still think you adopted a lost child? That we let you? No, Rachel. We placed her with you.
You were the test.
You always were. Rachel's knees nearly buckled. You're lying. He stepped forward slowly. Am I? Think about it. You changed your name. Disappeared. Ran from a past you thought no one knew. But we knew. We created the illusion of choice. You think it was fate that brought you Lily? That the system somehow let a single mother with no background check adopt a high-risk child with sealed records?
No.
We needed someone like you. Isolated, desperate, empathetic. And most of all, malleable. Rachel could hardly breathe. She looked at Lily, who stood still, unmoving, staring ahead like she wasn't even present. Why her? Why me? Caro's voice dropped. Because you both had something unique. She was born during one of our earliest trials. We lost control of the subjects, too many variables. But she survived. We implanted memories, changed neural pathways, designed her brain to carry information we couldn't store digitally. You were the clean slate. A blank canvas to see if the human psyche could be manipulated to accept a lie as reality. And you passed every test. Until now. Rachel's world shattered in an instant. Her entire life had been manufactured. Her motherhood. Her sense of purpose. Even her pain. None of it was hers. Caro turned back toward the monitors and added, You are just one of many. But you're the only one who made it this far. Rachel didn't wait to hear more. She grabbed Lily and ran through the corridor, past the surveillance wall, back toward the hatch.
But the facility was alive now.
Lights were flickering. Alarms low and pulsing. Footsteps echoed from every direction. People were coming.
Armed. Trained.
They weren't going to let her leave again. But as she turned the final corner, a door slammed shut in front of them. Behind it stood Erica.
Alive.
But very different. She wore a lab coat. And she wasn't surprised to see Rachel. You should have listened, Erica said quietly. I tried to help you leave it alone. Rachel could barely form the words. You were part of this? Erica nodded, eyes dark. We all are.
You don't understand what's at stake.
Lily isn't just a girl. She's the key to everything. Memory storage, cognitive imprinting, behavioral override. She's not a child. She's a vessel. Rachel backed away, holding Lily tighter than ever. You're wrong. She's my daughter. Erica's voice softened, almost sad. She was never yours, Rachel. And if you don't let her go, they're going to take you both. And with that, Rachel realized the betrayal cut deeper than she ever thought possible. Not because Erica had been working for them, but because she had once believed she was protecting her from something outside, when really, it had been growing right beside her the whole time. Rachel could barely hear her own thoughts over the blaring alarms echoing through the metal hallways, but her mind had never felt sharper. Everything, every lie, every warning, every whisper, had finally locked into place. This wasn't just about Lily. This was a blueprint for control. A generational experiment masquerading as parenthood. The files had been right. Project Haven Point didn't just create orphans, it created stories. Custom-designed lives meant to test the limits of belief, love, identity, and obedience. And now, with her heart pounding and her instincts screaming, Rachel realized the truth. Lily was never the subject. She was the trigger. The final stage in an experiment that required not just observation but activation. As the guards closed in, Rachel kept her body between them and Lily, but her voice was steady. "You're going to have to kill me to take her." She knew they would if ordered. And somewhere behind them, Dr. Caro was watching. She could feel it. Through the chaos, Erica moved to Rachel's side, not as an enemy now, but something stranger, an ally with too much blood on her hands to be trusted. "There's another way," she whispered, eyes darting toward a service tunnel Rachel hadn't noticed. "It's how I got out last time." Rachel hesitated, heart torn in every direction. She wanted to scream, to run, to collapse, but she had come too far. She had seen too much. They made it to the tunnel, crawling through tight passages thick with dust and heat. Lily never once cried, never once spoke, just clung to her hand like she understood this was the moment everything turned. The end or the beginning. At the final bend, a blast door blocked their path, sealed tight. "The biometric lock is back online," Erica said, panicked. "We can't open it without admin-level access." Rachel was ready to throw her body against it, to break herself trying, when Lily stepped forward again. Calm, robotic, like before. "I can open it," she whispered. "But I have to remember everything." Rachel didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Lily turned, eyes shimmering with something almost inhuman. "They made me forget to protect you. But now I have to remember what I really am." Rachel knelt beside her. "You're my daughter. You're not their experiment. You're not their machine." But Lily only smiled sadly, almost like a goodbye. She pressed her palm to the panel. It scanned her hand, then her eyes, then her thoughts. And the door unlocked. They emerged into an underground airstrip, decaying and overgrown but still active. A single aircraft sat waiting, unattended, engines whirring low. No crew, no markings, like it had been summoned only for them. Erica broke into a sprint. "We can fly out now. We can tell the world. This is our proof." Rachel followed, her arm around Lily. But before she could reach the plane, a sharp whistle pierced the air. Dr. Caro stood at the edge of the runway, flanked by 2 agents. "You think this ends here?" he said, raising his voice over the engines. "You think the truth matters to people anymore? We own the narrative, Rachel. You release this, we just spin it. You'll look insane. She'll be labeled unstable. And within weeks, this entire story will vanish, just like all the others." He wasn't bluffing. And Rachel knew it. This wasn't just a fight for escape. It was a war for belief. And they were already losing. But then Lily stepped forward. And she wasn't silent anymore. "I know what you did to the others," she said, her voice louder than it should have been for someone so small. "I remember the names. I remember their screams. I remember how you erased them. You can't erase me." Caro froze. "We wrote those memories. You're just repeating back what we put in you." But Lily shook her head slowly.
No.
"I went beyond the protocol. I kept what mattered. You wanted a vessel, but I became something else." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Not from footsteps, but from a systemic failure. Monitors in the tower blinking, lights failing one by one. "She's in the system," Erica muttered. "She's rewriting the archive." Panic spread across Caro's face. Shut her down. Kill the neural link. But it was too late. Lily had already uploaded everything. Every file, every recording, every classified document that detailed what Haven Point had done to generations of children and families across the country. It was already being mirrored across private networks and leaked through anonymous sources. TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, all buzzing with fragments of the truth. Lily wasn't just a vessel anymore. She was the release valve. As sirens wailed and chaos spread through the compound, Caro made one last move. He pulled a concealed weapon and took aim at Rachel, snarling, "You never should have existed. You were a glitch." But before he could fire, Erica stepped between them. The shot rang out, and she collapsed. Rachel screamed, catching her as she fell. Erica's breathing was shallow. "You were never the glitch," she whispered, blood pooling under her. "You were the control and you broke it." Her eyes went still. Rachel turned back to Caro, but the agents were already backing away. Lily stood there, not afraid, not shaken, but powerful.
Changed. This ends now, she said.
And then the twist. Lily turned to Rachel, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Mom, I know you love me, but they were right about one thing. You didn't find me. I found you. Rachel's breath caught. I chose you, Lily said. Out of all the families they gave me access to, I broke their code to reach you. Because I knew you'd protect me. You were the only one who wouldn't give up. Rachel dropped to her knees, sobbing, arms around her daughter, her world, her answer to every question. She hadn't been manipulated. She hadn't been brainwashed. She had been chosen. As the plane roared behind them, the truth burned across the internet. Anonymous leaks, live feeds, desperate attempts to silence the noise, but the secret was out. And for the first time, those in control were afraid. Rachel and Lily boarded the plane together, and behind them, Haven Point burned. But just before the doors closed, Lily looked back one last time and whispered under her breath, almost too quiet for Rachel to hear, "There's more like me." And then, silence. In the weeks that followed their escape, Rachel found herself navigating a reality that felt both foreign and strangely quiet. The noise that had once consumed her, the paranoia, the secrecy, the sleepless nights spent chasing answers in the dark, had been replaced with a strange kind of stillness. But it wasn't peace. Not entirely. Lily was safe, at least for now, and the two of them had settled into a borrowed house in a remote mountain town where no one asked too many questions. The air was clean, the neighbors distant, and the world seemed to spin a little slower up there. Yet even with the digital storm raging below, millions of people watching leaked files, government agencies issuing cold denials, and trending hashtags like #HavenPointTruth and #EraseChildren lighting up every platform, Rachel knew that silence didn't always mean safety. Sometimes, it just meant someone else was choosing to watch instead of act. Lily had changed. Not in the way Rachel feared, but in a way that made her sometimes wonder just how much of her daughter she had known to begin with. She laughed at cartoons, devoured peanut butter sandwiches, and still asked Rachel to braid her hair before bed. But there was an awareness behind her eyes now that felt almost ancient. She remembered everything. The memories they had erased, the files she had unlocked, and the faces of the other children, those who hadn't been lucky enough to escape. Rachel tried not to ask about them, but Lily would sometimes mention a name in passing, almost like she was keeping a list in her mind. She had a way of speaking now that was part child, part something else, something she had become the moment she unlocked that door and rewrote the system. Rachel had seen it, the way her daughter had stood there, speaking not like a victim but like a beacon, a signal to others still lost in the dark. Despite the chaos, the mainstream news had buried the story. There had been brief mentions, government experiments, whistleblower leaks, conspiracy chatter, but within days, the algorithms had shifted, the headlines moved on, and influencers started pushing other trending topics. The truth had gone viral, and then it had disappeared. But Rachel knew better than to think it had vanished. It had simply gone underground like the tunnels beneath Haven Point. People were still talking, still sharing, still questioning. Late-night podcasts, Reddit deep dives, true crime YouTubers dissecting every second of the footage Rachel had managed to upload. The mystery had taken on a life of its own, and in a strange way, that was exactly what she had hoped for. The world didn't need to believe her to be changed by what they saw. Seeds of doubt had been planted, and sometimes that was all it took. One night, as snow drifted softly against the windows and the fire crackled low, Rachel sat beside Lily and opened the envelope she had been avoiding for days. It had arrived without a return address, delivered to the edge of their unlisted P.O. box. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note. Just 2 words. She's not alone. Rachel plugged it into her laptop with trembling hands, half expecting it to explode or erase her system. But instead, a folder appeared. Dozens of files, photos, and short videos. Children in different cities, different ages, each with subtle anomalies. Reports of memory glitches, strange dreams, cases dismissed by doctors as trauma-related disorders. But they weren't. Rachel saw it instantly. These were the others. The ones like Lily. It wasn't just Haven Point. It never had been. It was bigger, global, systemic, layered so deep that most people would never even notice. She turned to Lily, who was already watching her. "They're waking up," her daughter said softly, no fear in her voice. "Just certainty. And they're going to need help." Rachel felt the weight of it all hit her again, not as panic this time, but purpose. She had always thought her job was to protect Lily, and it still was. But now, her role had shifted. She was no longer just a mother fighting for her child. She was part of something larger. A silent network of truth seekers, survivors, and protectors. A resistance made of people who had seen too much to stay quiet. Rachel knew she couldn't go back to a normal life. She didn't want to, because normal had always been a carefully written script. And she had finally learned how to read between the lines. As dawn broke the next morning, Rachel stood at the edge of the mountain trail, watching the sun stretch across the valley. Lily was beside her, coat zipped up, eyes scanning the horizon like she was waiting for something or someone. Maybe she was. Rachel didn't ask. She had stopped asking questions with answers she might not be ready for. But as she stood there, wind brushing her cheeks and the sound of her daughter's breathing steady beside her, she realized something profound. Peace didn't come from having all the answers. It came from knowing you were no longer afraid to ask the questions. They would keep moving, keep watching, keep listening for the ones who hadn't found their way out yet. The world wasn't ready to believe what had really happened. But that didn't matter anymore. The truth was alive now, and truth has a way of spreading, even when people try to bury it. And just as Rachel turned to head back toward the cabin, Lily looked up at her with a small, knowing smile. "It's not over," she said. "It's just starting." And deep down, Rachel knew she was right.